I punished a Karen. You might not sleep after hearing this. TLDR, I silenced a Karen who was spreading lies and chaos in my neighborhood. Now she's a shell of herself, haunted by the silence I cursed her with. It wasn't enough to stop her, but it was enough to teach her. I've never been one for drama. I live quietly, away from the chaos. I keep to myself, and I do what I do best. But there's something you should know about me. I'm not what you think I am, and sometimes people push me too far. Like Teresita. She moved into the neighborhood about 6 months ago. At first, she seemed harmless enough, just another loud, nosy woman with too much time on her hands. But then, she started spreading rumors. Vile, hateful rumors that poisoned everything. She accused the Callaways, sweet, gentle old souls, of stealing from her garden. She told the children that their parents were abusive, that they were hiding terrible secrets. She ruined lives with nothing but words. And then, one evening, I overheard her laugh, and I realized she needed to be punished. The night of the silence. I don't care what people think of me. I'm a witch, and I'm not ashamed of it. The craft is not some airy, light thing. It's deep, old, and rooted in the earth. And Teresita, with her venomous tongue, had gone too far. That night, the air was thick with humidity, and the moon hung low, just the way I needed it. My ritual room was dark, except for the flickering candlelight. You can call it a witch's den, but to me, it's a sanctuary. The shelves are lined with jars of powders and herbs, bones of old creatures, and mementos of those I've dealt with before. I walked in, my footsteps echoing, and I set to work. I made her. Or rather, I recreated her. I crafted a doll, each stitch pulling her closer to me, to her. Her sharp eyes, her twisted smile, every detail was perfect. I could almost feel her watching me as I worked, her presence seeping into the room. When I was done, I laid her on the altar, a mockery of her in every way. I muttered the words older than any man could understand. Words that made the air heavy and thick. I could feel the walls pulse with power. I tied the first knot around the doll's mouth, pulling the thread tighter with each pass, binding her silence, closing her mouth, and with it, her ability to destroy. Her screams would be nothing. Her voice would be a ghost of itself. The beginning of her end. By dawn, I sat back in my chair and watched. I watched her walk down the street, just like every morning, her lips twitching as she talked to the neighbors. But today was different. She opened her mouth to speak, and nothing. Her face contorted. Her lips moved, but not a single sound left her. She screamed, her throat closing, her body shaking with the effort. But no one could hear her. The neighbors didn't notice at first. They thought it was just her usual dramatics. But I could feel it, the rising panic in her chest. She clawed at her throat, her face growing redder and redder with each attempt to shout her lies. And then, it happened. She collapsed, gasping for air, still choking on the silence I had wrapped around her. The world went quiet in a way I can't describe. No one said anything, not even the children. Everyone was too terrified to speak, too stunned by the unnatural silence that had descended over Teresita's home. The very air seemed to hold its breath, waiting. The nightmares begin. 4 days, Teresita was mute. Not a single word, not a whisper. She tried everything, screaming into her pillow, scribbling furiously on pieces of paper, gesturing wildly with her hands, but the silence remained. The neighbors started to whisper. They'd seen it too, the way she walked like a zombie, eyes wide with fear, mouth open in desperate attempts to speak. But it didn't stop there. By the third night, I saw her standing outside, staring at my house, her gaze seething with hatred. I felt it. Her eyes were burning through my windows, trying to reach into me with whatever power she had left. But it was too late for her. She was already broken. The final warning. The moon was full again. I stood in front of my altar, the flames flickering around me. I could still feel her presence, her need for vengeance. But I had given her a taste of it. Silence was not the end. It was the beginning. I could let her go, release her from the punishment I'd bound her to, or I could make her a lesson for all who might dare challenge me. I whispered the final incantation, my voice trembling with a power I'd only called upon once before. The mouth that spreads lies shall never speak again. The tongue that poisons will be forever silent. But know this, Teresita, in silence you shall suffer. For you will never speak again. Not to beg. Not to cry. I burned the doll, watching as the flames consumed it. Her twisted face melted into the smoke, her muffled screams rising into the air like a suffocating fog. When the smoke cleared, she was gone. But her punishment was far from over. The aftermath. Teresita still lives in the neighborhood, but she's different now. She walks like a ghost, her eyes hollow, her face pale as bone. She still tries to speak, but now it's like she's lost her own identity, her sense of self. The neighbors avoid her, and no one dares to say a word about it. But the children still whisper that she's haunted, that her screams echo in the night, carried on the wind. No one is sure if they're real or just in their heads, but the feeling is there. And me? I'm still here. Watching. Waiting. Because silence is only the beginning. And if anyone else dares to break the peace of my neighborhood again, I'll be ready. Clara's revenge. I've always loved my job at the cafe. It's the kind of place where everyone knows each other by name, where the coffee is always warm, and the atmosphere is peaceful. I treat my customers with all the care in the world because I believe that sometimes a simple act of kindness can make someone's day. But, like everywhere, there's always one exception. And that exception was Karen. She used to come in a few times a week, and every time she entered, I knew it was going to be a tough day. Nothing was ever good enough for her. If the coffee took more than 5 minutes, she complained. If the temperature wasn't exactly how she liked it, she made a scene. And, of course, the most frustrating part, she always demanded special treatment and acted as if she owned the place. I was used to it by then. So, when she walked in that night, near closing time, with that look on her face like she was looking for something to complain about, I mentally prepared myself. She went straight to the counter. I asked for no milk, but you put it in. See? I told you. How could you make such a mistake? She yelled, pointing at the coffee. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. I apologize for the mistake, Karen. I'll remake your order right away. She crossed her arms and looked at me, but instead of accepting the explanation, she raised her voice even more. No. I want to speak to the manager. This is unacceptable. I knew what was coming next. She wanted to cause a scene, to make sure everyone saw how mistreated she was. I went to the office, already preparing to offer the discount that always worked to smooth things over. But when I came back, something caught my attention. Karen was holding her phone, filming. I knew exactly what she was trying to do. Create a victimization story to post on social media and get more attention. That's when I decided I wasn't going to let her leave with her narrative. Instead of panicking, as she probably expected, I walked up to the counter and, with a calm smile, took the phone from her hands. If you want to post something on social media, maybe it would be interesting to show the truth. I also recorded our conversation. I said, calmly. She froze for a moment, in disbelief. What? She asked, almost not believing what I had just said. I opened the video app on my phone and, with a tap, showed her the recording. I had filmed the entire conversation, from the moment she arrived to her exaggerated reaction. My recording showed me apologizing for the mistake, trying to calm the situation, but it also made it clear that I wouldn't tolerate that kind of behavior. I had captured the exact moment when she started raising her voice, accusing me of negligence, and even making manipulative videos. I have the recording of our entire conversation, Karen. And if you want to take this further, I'm more than ready. I said firmly. She was speechless. For a few seconds, she just stared at me, not knowing what to do. But when she realized that her attempt to make me the villain wasn't going to work, she simply grabbed her purse and left without saying a word. She just shot me a furious glance before disappearing through the door. I looked at my team and, with a subtle smile, said, sometimes, the best thing to do is let people show who they really are. Karen never returned to the cafe. The video I made was never shared, but the story quickly spread among our regular customers. They became even more loyal to me, knowing that, although I was always kind and attentive, I also knew when to stand my ground and defend what was right. The cafe became, for everyone, the place where things always happened fairly. I never needed to expose the recording. But I knew that night, I had taught Karen a lesson she would never forget. And, in a way, she also taught me something. Sometimes, there's no need to shout or make a scene. Sometimes, True strength lies in staying calm and letting the truth speak for itself. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. The impossible request from the Karen. I never imagined that a simple day at work in my clothing store would turn into a nightmare. That day seemed like any other, until she walked in. The Karen. She went straight to the blouse section with that arrogant look I could recognize from a mile away. I was organizing the display when she appeared. She looked at me with that expression, as if she had something to complain about, like I was personally responsible for all the problems in the universe. The first thing she said was, "I want a blouse, but not just any blouse. It has to be a specific color and made of a fabric that doesn't exist. And I want it to have a cut that hasn't even been invented yet. And it has to be a limited edition just for me." I stood there for a moment, trying to understand if she was serious. Sure, I knew there were always demanding customers, but this was beyond reasonable. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but the collection we have at the moment is limited to the styles we have on display. We don't have anything exactly like you're asking for." She rolled her eyes at me, clearly irritated. "No, you don't understand. I need a blouse that matches my mood, that represents what I'm feeling right now." "Can't you do that?" she said, as if I were asking her to solve an easy problem, like I were a high-end designer who could create something from scratch in the blink of an eye. I tried to stay composed, but it was getting hard. Just when I was about to suggest she look at the pieces we had in stock, she shot out, "Oh, and the blouse has to be made of a fabric that doesn't wrinkle, because, I don't have time to iron clothes. You get it, right? I'm a busy woman." She said it with such superiority, as if she were telling me a wonderful story about her hectic life. "I understand, ma'am. We do have some options that are quite easy to care for, but unfortunately, we can't create a custom piece. Our collection is already finished." And then she really lost it. She started yelling, demanding to speak to the manager. I went to the back to find my boss, who was in the stockroom, and he came out to try to handle the situation. She started accusing him of being disrespectful, of not knowing how to treat an important person, and when he calmly suggested she look at the other models, she just stepped away, stomped her foot, and said, "I'm not going to accept this fifth-rate service. I'll tell everyone that you didn't give me the blouse I asked for and that your store is trash." She turned around and, in a dramatic act, started filming our store with her phone. She filmed the aisles, the display, and of course, our faces. And as if that wasn't enough, she started talking about the horrible attitude of the staff, as if it were our fault that we couldn't create a blouse that answered her fashion dreams. It was then that, out of nowhere, she did something completely unexpected. She grabbed one of the blouses from the rack and, with all her anger, threw the piece on the floor and started stomping on it, screaming, "This is garbage." I looked at my boss, who seemed as stunned as I was, and just turned away. I didn't know what else to do. My patience was gone. When she left, still shouting that we'd regret it, I just said, "Don't worry, Karen. Don't worry." I didn't know if she realized it, but the camera she was using to record the offense of our store had captured the moment when she herself destroyed one of our pieces. I knew this would somehow backfire on her, so I decided to do the same. I recorded the entire incident. The story went viral quickly on social media, but to my surprise, we weren't the villains. People started pointing out her absurd behavior, and soon she was left with no followers. Somewhere, someone had to explain to Karen that influencing people doesn't mean mistreating others. The house Karen wanted. I always thought my life was peaceful. I had my job, my routine, and a comfortable home where I could relax after a tiring day. I never imagined that one day all of that would be threatened by a simple Karen. But, unfortunately, I was about to find out how such an unbearable person could turn into my nightmare. The story started on a sunny morning. I was in my kitchen, making my coffee, when I heard a knock at the door. When I opened it, there she was. The Karen from the neighborhood, the woman everyone tried to avoid. She had that forced smile and a look in her eyes that definitely hid something more. "Hi, are you home?" she asked, as if the answer were obvious. I nodded, not quite sure what to expect. I was thinking, "This house is pretty big, isn't it?" she continued, glancing over her shoulder as if she was inspecting the neighborhood. I gave a simple answer, trying to be polite. "Yes, it's a comfortable house. Why do you ask?" The Karen smiled strangely and, without any introduction, blurted out, I want your house. I stood there in silence, not believing what she had just said. I thought maybe I had misheard, so I asked, "What?" She stepped closer, as if about to tell me a secret, and said with a tone that made it seem like she had already decided everything for me, "I want your house. And honestly, I don't think you deserve to live here. I'm much more suited for this place. I'm more important, more influential. You know, I have so many followers and so much influence." I almost fell over. This couldn't be happening. I tried to process, but she kept talking as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "You must realize that someone with as much power as me would be much better in this house. I deserve it. I could make a post about it and make sure everyone knows it was an act of kindness on my part to move here, to help the community. I could do so much more for this neighborhood than you ever could." I didn't know whether to laugh or get angry. She kept going, not realizing how insane she sounded. "I'm moving in here. I've decided. And please, be polite and just hand me the keys." Her tone was so authoritative that it almost made me doubt my own sanity. But I knew I couldn't back down. I took a deep breath, regained my composure, and said, firmly, "I'm sorry, but you're not taking my house. Not for 1,000,000 followers." She seemed taken aback, as though it were a huge surprise that I didn't agree immediately. But instead of giving up, she did something even crazier. "Then I'll make sure everyone in the neighborhood knows what kind of person you are. I'll post that you're selfish and that you're preventing the progress of the neighborhood just because you didn't give me your house." That was the last straw. She wasn't just asking for my house. She was trying to turn everything around, painting me as the villain. At that moment, I realized I had to act, and act fast. I went inside my house, grabbed my phone, and started recording. I was calm but firm, and I began to expose the whole situation to make it clear how absurd her demands were. "Karen, you're not getting my house. And no, you're not going to use your social media to manipulate me or control my life. That's not going to work." She turned red with rage, but I kept recording. She tried to interrupt me, but I just ignored her, showing everyone her true face and the absurdity of her attempt to control me. In the end, speechless, she turned around and walked out, probably already thinking of another plan to manipulate me. And what happened next? Well, the story quickly spread among the neighbors, and Karen became the joke of the neighborhood. People started to see how far she was willing to go to get what she wanted, even if it was the impossible. As for me, I learned a valuable lesson. Believe me, when a Karen enters your life, you might be caught off guard, but never forget to stand your ground and defend what's yours. And of course, always record. Because, in the end, the truth is your greatest ally. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.